Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished professional from Lusaka, Zambia, Mr. Chisala C. Bwalya. Chisala, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Chisala is the mission ambassador to the African Union at the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, or FIGHR. He's an author, researcher, speaker, mentor, impact leader, founder, global change maker, visionary, humanitarian, and a social entrepreneur. He's also an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Chisala has been recognized, felicitated, and awarded several times. So, Chisala, before we talk about FIGHR, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Thank you so much for having me today. And I'm so delighted to be here and share my experience and, my work with the world. So a little bit about me. Well, I come from a family of five. I'm a firstborn in a family of five. I have 3 brothers and 1 sister. Then as pertaining to the work that I do, well, there are basically 2 events that I mostly talk about when I talk about my journey that really shaped me to be the kind of person I am today. And those are the 2 events that really pushed me to even start the work that I do in gender advocacy and human rights. So the first one was the death of my father. I lost my father in 2010.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And after I lost my father, my whole world collapsed.
Okay.
And so it was very difficult, to go through that kind of grief and pick myself when I was just young, and it was a situation where I didn't even have a lot of people to even talk to and to share that grief with me. And so to a certain extent, I went into a depression. And so as time went on, I battled with depression, but at the end of the day, I picked up myself in the process, and I vowed to create spaces for other people within my community that might be facing or might have faced what I faced. The second event is I grew up in an environment that was very harsh. I witnessed a number of GBV cases, gender-based violence cases, sexual and gender-based violence cases within my community and within my family, where I saw my uncles beating my aunties and all that. And, for me, I was just like, these are people who have a lot of potential. These women who are being abused today. So I also took it upon myself and said, you know what? I think as we go along, I will have to also create spaces for young women, young men who are going through this kind of abuse, who do not have anyone to speak out for them. And so it is those 2 particular events that have shaped me to be the kind of person I am. So fast forward, I started my NGO in 2021 called the Center for Research, Consultancy and Advocacy on Gender-Based Violence. The mission is to speak out for people that are facing challenges and those that are victims of gender-based violence. So we create spaces for them, safer spaces for them. We advocate for them, we speak for them, provide counseling services for them. So it was from that point that I was recognized by this international organization called the Federation for International Gender and Human Rights. And I was appointed mission ambassador to Zambia at that time. And so I have been working in Zambia from that time. Then just this year, just early this year, I was appointed now mission ambassador to the African Union, so that now we can spread the cause to the African Union, and at least the FIGHR should have a voice in those summits and those general assemblies.
Fantastic. Yes. Congratulations, Chisala, on your appointment. So for our viewers and listeners, tell me a little bit about the role of the FIGHR and what is your role as mission ambassador?
Thank you so much for that question. So the mission ambassador to the African Union role is a key position within the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. In that, as a mission ambassador, I'm responsible for representing their organization at the African Union and promoting the organization's objectives, mission, and vision. So my role as a mission ambassador is to engage with key stakeholders at the African Union, including policymakers, different government officials, civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, and community-based organizations. So we do this to advocate for policies and practices that protect and promote gender and human rights. The other work that we do at the African Union as a mission ambassador is to advocate for policy change, where I work to promote policy change at the African Union that advances gender and human rights. So this includes engaging with policymakers and advocating for the adoption and implementation of policies that protect the rights of marginalized groups within the African continent. The other one is I also work to raise awareness. So as a mission ambassador, I raise awareness about gender and human rights issues across the continent through various outreach activities, including public speaking, like we're doing now, media interviews, and social media campaigns. So I do this by raising awareness about these issues, to help build public support for policies and practices that protect and promote gender and human rights. And the most important one, again, is building partnerships. I cannot operate efficiently and effectively without building stronger synergies within my space. So as a mission ambassador to the African Union, I work on, building partnerships with other organizations and stakeholders to advance gender and human rights. So this includes collaborating with, other civil society organizations and working also with government officials within the African continent to build support for policy change.
How wonderful. So tell me now, what are some of the major gender and human rights issues that are currently being faced in the countries within the African Union?
Nice. Well, there are basically a number of gender and human rights issues that are currently being faced by countries within the African Union. The first one is gender-based violence. So we're saying that gender-based violence is basically a pervasive issue that is across the African continent, which is affecting girls, women, and men alike, in various forms. And this includes, rape, sexual harassment, intimate partner violence, female genital mutilation, which is still being practiced in some parts of Africa. Now, despite the efforts to address the issue of GBV, it still remains a prevalent issue within the African continent, with many survivors facing stigma and discrimination. So GBV is one of the most prevalent issues that we are still facing on the African continent. Just last week, I was reading an article, that was published by one of the media houses here in Zambia, that we have a surge in the cases of in rape cases today. And so now we're trying to understand what is causing this surge, this rise in the cases in the rape cases in Zambia today. The other issue is women's political participation. This issue still remains prevalent also, where women continue to be underrepresented in political leadership positions across the African continent, with only a few countries, meeting the recommended 30% threshold for women representation in parliament. So this limits women's ability to participate in decision-making processes and advocate for their rights. So women political participation also remains a gender and human rights issue, because not all women have the ability or have been given the chance, to stand, even to contest in elections. The other one is economic empowerment. So, as you know, women and girls continue to face significant barriers to accessing economic opportunities within the African continent, including limited access to education and training, discrimination in the workplace, and limiting access to financial resources. So this limits their ability to achieve economic independence and contribute fully to development in their communities.
Fantastic.
So this is also a limitation.
Amazing.
The last one that maybe we can talk about is child marriage. Child marriage also remains a significant issue across the African continent.
Okay.
I told you about, as I earlier alluded to, in my own family, we've had cases where young girls, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, have been married off to older men within my own family. And I look at that, and I also look at what is happening within the African continent in different cultures, different cultural settings. It is so sad that young girls are being married off at a young age, tender age, without even giving them access to education and other social amenities. So we have many girls who are now being forced into marriage at a young age within the African continent. And this limits their access to education and economic opportunities, and putting them at risk of early pregnancy and other health issues.
Correct.
So these are just some of the, the most prevalent gender and human rights issues that we're currently facing within the African continent.
Very interesting. And given the fact that Africa is such a large continent with so many countries, how does FIGHR collaborate with different member states to create and implement policies that protect gender and human rights?
So the FIGHR, in collaboration with the African Union and its member states, is something that is very significant, because the African Union is comprised of different facets. They look at different things, but our main interest is the aspect of gender and human rights. And so, the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights collaborates with the African Union and its member states in several ways. Some of these are through advocacy and lobbying, where the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights engages in advocacy and lobbying efforts to promote the adoption and implementation of different policies and laws that protect gender and human rights within the African continent. So this includes engaging with different policymakers and government officials at both local, national, and regional levels to push for policy change and to also raise awareness about human rights issues within the African continent. The other way that FIGHR collaborates with the African Union and its member states is through research and analysis. So the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights conducts research and analysis on human rights issues in Africa, which is used to inform policy recommendations and advocacy efforts. So this research is often shared with the different policymakers and government officials to help inform decision making, because we have data, on our fingertips. So when we share with them, that is going to help them formulate better policies that are going to speak to gender and human rights. The other one is through capacity building and training. So at the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, we offer capacity building and training. So just last month, we opened a pool for people to enroll for a human rights advocacy course. So we've been offering this from the time that we were founded. And so apart from the human rights courses, we also offer courses in capacity building, human rights development, relationship building and human rights advocacy. We also offer programs in mental health. We also offer, different courses in inclusion and diversity. Then now there was also an introduction of the professional advocacy, gender and human rights, and the chaplaincy program that was introduced. So we offer this capacity building and training to support the different policymakers and government officials and civil society organizations to help them better understand human rights issues, the core human rights issues, and help them develop strategies for promoting gender and human rights in their various communities where they're coming from. The last one is we also participate in policy-making processes. So the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights participates in policy-making processes at the local, national, and regional levels to advocate for inclusion of gender and human rights considerations in policy decisions. This includes participating in consultations within the African Union, policy forums, and other decision-making processes to ensure that the voices of the marginalized groups are heard and their rights are protected. Remember that it is not every organization that is speaking for the marginalized groups within the African continent or elsewhere around the world. So the FIGHR thereby comes on board to speak or to be a voice for the voiceless in our community, especially those that cannot speak out for their rights and for what they need within the spectrum of the African continent.
Wonderful.
So that is these are just the ways that the Federation has collaborated with the African
So can
Union.
you share with me maybe one example of a successful initiative that has been implemented through FIGHR?
Yes, please. So we have implemented what we call the He for She campaign. So now the He for She campaign is a global initiative, actually, that seeks to engage men and boys in the fight for gender equality. So the campaign has been implemented in actually several countries within the African continent, including Nigeria, where it has helped to raise awareness about gender issues and encourage men to take an active role in promoting gender equality. So that is just one of them. The other one is the 50-50 campaign, which is a movement to increase the number of women in political leadership positions within the African continent. So this campaign has actually been very successful in several countries, including Rwanda, which now has the highest percentage of women in parliament in the world.
Wonderful. And Chisala, tell me, what kind of a role can local communities and grassroots organizations play in promoting a lot of the causes of FIGHR?
Wonderful. Firstly, CBOs, community-based organizations, are at the heart of the work that we do, because these are the organizations that are, experiencing these issues. These are the ones that have the first-hand information on the many, many issues surrounding gender and human rights within the African continent and within the different communities, right? When you talk about issues surrounding gender-based violence, for instance, okay, a person who is at the national level cannot be compared to someone who is on the grassroots, because someone on the national level is looking at it from that lens, but someone within the community is looking at that issue from that level because they understand that issue. They're interacting with the people. They have the first-hand information. They know the root causes of those problems. So local-based organizations or CBOs play a crucial and critical role in promoting gender and human rights within the African continent, because these organizations often have a deep understanding, as I earlier alluded to, of the local context and work that is closely related to, the community members. And it is through these community-based organizations that we're now able to raise awareness about human rights and provide support, especially for survivors of violence. Now, the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights recognizes the important role that local communities and grassroots organizations play in promoting gender and human rights. And we, as an organization, work to support them through a range of initiatives and programs, okay, such as capacity building and training, like I earlier alluded to. We offer different courses. The other one is funding and resources. We offer, funding and resources.
Chisala, I'm sorry I have to cut you, but we're running out of time. So I've got two questions for you. So I also wanted to ask you that, the African Union's agenda for 2063 has a framework that addresses gender and human rights. How is FIGHR involved in this long-term vision?
Okay, so the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights is involved in supporting the African Union's Agenda 2063 framework through a range of initiatives and programs. For example, the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights works with local organizations and communities to promote women empowerment and gender equality. We also provide support for survivors of gender-based violence and promote women's leadership and decision-making. Now, in addition, we also engage in advocacy and policy work to promote gender and human rights. Now, as you may be aware, the Agenda 2063 of the African Union is a long-term development plan, for the continent, and it outlines different aspirations. But on these aspirations, the aspect of gender and human rights is a key component, because it aims to help us achieve, the gender equality and women empowerment, to end gender-based violence and promote, women's leadership and decision-making.
Okay. So I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is that what are some of the common misconceptions about gender and human rights in Africa, and how can these be addressed through education and awareness?
Lovely. There are a lot of misconceptions about gender and human rights. The first one misconception is women are inferior to men and should not have the same rights.
I see.
As you may be aware, there's still some inherent misogynies that exist in our world today that have put women as second-class citizens. And so there is this inherent misogyny within the African continent, within many communities, that a woman's place is the kitchen, that a woman should not be educated, that at the end of the day, when you have female children at home, that is a sign of wealth, because the aim there is to marry them to someone who's wealthy so that you get more money from them, or many animals like in the African continent. So that is one misconception that exists. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that women should also be given a fair chance to education. They should be given a fair chance, to the world. They should be given a fair chance to every opportunity that is given to a boy child or a male counterpart. So that is one misconception that exists. The other one is that gender-based violence is a private matter and should not be reported. So just last year, we started a campaign that speaks to breaking the silence on gender-based violence. You find that, and this is an experience from the ground, that there are a lot of young people, young girls that have been abused in homes, and parents are so quiet about those issues. So we want to break that silence, and that is what we've been working on. So they are saying that gender-based violence is a private matter. Don't talk about it elsewhere. But we're trying to break that silence. So maybe those are due to time, those are the two misconceptions that still exist, that women are second-class citizens and that gender-based violence is a private matter, which should not be the case.
Very good. Thank you. I can add one more question now, and that is that, how can international organizations, governments, and individuals best support the amazing work FIGHR is doing?
Thank you for that question. Well, there are several ways that international organizations, governments, and individuals can come in to help the work that we do as FIGHR. And I'll just mention quickly 4 key ones. The first one is financial support. I think international organizations and governments can provide financial support and resources to our organization and the African Union to support our programs and initiatives by in promoting gender equality and human rights. The other one is technical support or technical assistance. So international organizations and governments can provide, technical assistance to our organization and the African Union, such as sharing expertise on human rights, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, as well as providing, more training and capacity building support to us. The other one is collaboration and partnerships. So international organizations, governments, and individuals can collaborate with our organization on joint initiatives and projects to promote gender and human rights in the African continent. And maybe the last one can be support for the local organizations. So international organizations and governments can support, local organizations in Africa that are working with us to promote gender and human rights. This can involve providing funding, technical assistance, and other forms of support to strengthen the capacity of our organization to help us, carry out our work efficiently and effectively.
Amazing. And Chisala, my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing understanding of the challenges being faced in the African Union about gender and human rights, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away on the subject of gender and human rights?
Well, I'll just mention 3 key points. The first one is gender equality is fundamental to human rights.
Correct.
In that gender equality, dear viewers, is a basic human right that is essential for creating a just and equitable society.
Correct.
Number 2, education and awareness raising are critical to promoting gender and human rights. In that education and awareness raising are key strategies for challenging harmful attitudes and beliefs about gender and human rights in the African continent and across board. So by promoting education and awareness raising efforts, we can empower individuals to understand their rights and advocate for themselves and others. And lastly, international cooperation is essential to promoting gender and human rights in Africa. In that, international organizations, governments, and individuals all have a role to play in promoting gender and human rights in Africa by working together and providing financial, technical, and advocacy support. We can create a more just and equitable society where all individuals can enjoy their human rights and live freely from discrimination and violence.
Oh,
Maybe
wonderful.
just one last
Sure,
point.
sure.
Every time that I move around, people ask me, you are a young person. How did you get yourself to this point?
Mhm.
And my advice to my fellow young people out there is never limit yourself. Believe in your abilities and know that the world is looking up to us. We have a role to play in making this world a better place to live in. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. What a great lesson. Thank you. And on that note, and your three amazing lessons, gender equality is a basic human right. Second, you said was education and awareness are critical. And third, you said was the international cooperation is essential to be able to support the gender and human rights challenges that the African Union faces. Thank you, Chisala, for speaking to me about all the amazing work FIGHR, which is again Federation of International Gender and Human Rights Organization, is doing in Africa for so many of the challenges that are being faced. Thank you also for telling me about the different challenges, the different misconceptions, and all the great work that is happening. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.